Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's honestly a little intense. We're unpacking a piece of source material that basically claims to decode the hidden mechanics of human behavior. It's a completely neutral look at what they call practical, real-world psychological manipulation tactics. Now, the source makes a pretty bold promise here. It claims to teach you how to gain the upper hand in social situations, and it does this without force, without aggression, and definitely without magic tricks. It's purely about leveraging human psychology. It's a super fascinating, if slightly unsettling look into how some people view human interaction, and we're going to map out exactly what they're teaching. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so to kick things off, the material hooks its audience with a really disruptive, almost jarring philosophical question. Are the decisions you made today actually yours? The creator is essentially arguing that we're all walking around operating under this massive illusion of control. We falsely believe we're the ones totally in charge of our lives, our relationships, and the respect we get from our peers or our bosses. But according to this text, that's a total myth. It's just a comforting little lie designed to keep us happy while other people are, well, pulling the strings.
Right, so the foundation of this entire framework boils down to one quote. Every conversation is a power play. Yeah, it is a wildly aggressive worldview. This framework insists that human interaction isn't just about, bonding or connection. Nope. It's a giant game of leverage. And they lay out a very explicit warning. If you aren't actively playing the game in your daily social interactions, well, someone else is playing you. So, with that heavy foundation set, the text breaks this idea of control down into a structured escalation arc, and it all starts with basic defense.
So here we go with Level 1 Defensive Maneuvers. The basic idea here is that before you can take over a room, you first have to know how to protect yourself against highly ego-driven people. And that brings us to something they call the savior trap, gaining control by making the other person feel like they hold all the power. The framework suggests that raising your voice or puffing out your chest to show dominance, that's an amateur mistake. Why? Because the human brain is fundamentally starved for relevance. People absolutely crave feeling important. They want to be the hero of the story, right? So the savior trap is all about gaining control by giving the other person the complete illusion that they're holding the cards, when in reality, you're the one totally orchestrating the interaction. Makes you wonder if you've ever fallen for this without even realizing it, huh?
The material actually gives us a very specific scenario for how to pull this off. Picture this. You've got a highly egotistical new boss, or maybe just a really senior colleague. Step 1 is simply identifying that massive ego. Then, step 2, you approach them and display what the text calls a calculated weakness. You actually bring them a problem that you already know the answer to. Then, step 3, you ask for just 1 single minute of their unique expert help. You frame it like absolutely no one else in the world could possibly solve this but them. See what's happening? You're massaging that ego without resorting to super obvious bootlicking. You're essentially building them a stage so they can play the hero.
Now here is where the psychological payoff kicks in, and it's all about subconscious bonding and forgiveness. By getting this highly egotistical person to invest their own time and their own ego into saving you, the text suggests you're forging a really powerful subconscious bond. Basically, human psychology dictates that we tend to favor the people we've helped. Because they've invested a piece of their ego in you, they're going to subconsciously start to like you a whole lot more. Think about it. You've essentially just hacked their ego to buy yourself an insurance policy. Now they're far more likely to just wave off or forgive any of your actual mistakes in the future.
But hey, it doesn't stop at just playing defense. Now we are escalating to Level 2, Active Social Attack. This is all about taking the reins and dictating the terms of engagement.
This brings us right to the concept of the reality anchor, controlling the atmosphere and norms of a social situation. The big idea here is that literally every social situation has a baseline reality, like a set mood or an unspoken norm. And whoever sets this reality anchor is the one who gets to dictate what's considered totally normal and what's considered incredibly awkward. The material uses a fantastic example for this. Have you ever noticed how some people can tell just a painfully terrible joke but still get laughs, while someone else tells a brilliant, witty joke and gets pure crickets? Well, it's because that first person is the one holding the reality anchor for that specific group.
So let's look at how this actually applies defensively, like if you're dealing with mockery. If someone mocks you in front of a group, the normal knee-jerk reaction is anger or counterattack. You swear, you launch right back at them. But the framework argues that doing that simply hands all your power straight over to the attacker, because you're choosing to play by their reality. Using the reality anchor technique, on the other hand, is completely different. It relies on silence and observation. You completely flat-out refuse to engage on their terms.
The text gives us the exact mechanical steps to execute this reality shift. When mocked, first, take a solid 1-second pause. Do not react emotionally, just pause. Second, maintain unblinking eye contact. Third, look at the attacker as if they are literally an alien who just said something completely and utterly incomprehensible. Just stare. Then, finally, after a few heavy seconds of dead silence, simply ask, "Are you okay?" The text claims this completely turns the tables. It shoves all the awkwardness right back onto the bully, causing them to internally panic because you've just abruptly ripped that reality anchor right out of their hands. So, once you've learned to command a room, the strategy escalates again. We are now at level 3, long-term conditioning. This is where we move away from quick, one-off interactions and into methodical, slow-burn manipulation. Enter a tactic they call the invisible chain, conditioning the brain's pattern recognition to create a habit of agreement. Look, you cannot control someone all at once. If you just walk up and ask for a massive favor up front, their defense mechanisms instantly trigger, and the answer is going to be a hard no. Instead, the invisible chain is all about subtly conditioning the brain's pattern recognition. You are feeding the target's brain a continuous, almost invisible loop of microcommands. The goal? To build a deeply ingrained automatic habit of agreement.
And building this chain happens entirely under the radar. Let's say you're on a date, or maybe hanging out with a new group of friends. Step 1, hey, pass the salt. Step 2, maybe a little bit later, hold my phone for a sec while I put on my jacket. Step 3, let's go over to this specific location. You are starting with requests so incredibly small, so mundane, that it would be socially impossible, or at least really, really weird for them to refuse. What you're actually doing is training their subconscious to follow your directives. You speak, they act. It's that simple.
The ultimate conclusion of this tactic is what the material calls the 30-day trap. The idea is that if you maintain this subtle, subconscious loop of tiny agreements for about a month, the target's brain becomes heavily conditioned. So when you suddenly escalate and make a massive request, their brain literally lacks the established reasoning pathway to say no. They're already totally caught up in the chain of saying yes to you. It's just wild to think about.
And that brings us to the final, and let's be honest, undoubtedly the darkest tier of influence in this source. Level 4, deep psychological vulnerability.
This tactic is known as the insecurity shield, controlling someone by protecting their fake public persona while acknowledging their private fears. The underlying premise here is really quite cynical. The text suggests that deep down, everyone is basically a walking liar. We all wear this perfect, carefully curated public mask just to hide our darkest, most secret insecurities, whether that's an intense fear of looking foolish, the dread of being seen as a bad person, or maybe a deep-seated terror of being abandoned. The source argues that the key to ultimate control is finding that specific, hidden insecurity.
Now notice the huge contrast in how different people handle this kind of information. The mistake, the normal, amateur move, is to discover someone's insecurity and then use it to mock or belittle them. The framework calls that a massive error. But the masterstroke? That's doing the exact opposite. You build the shield around it. Let's say your partner or a friend desperately wants to look super smart in public, but you know that privately they constantly overthink and doubt absolutely everything. Well, you don't expose them. Instead, you actively protect that smart public image. You cover up their mistakes in front of other people. You are effectively building an impenetrable shield around their greatest weakness.
But here is the really chilling final step that completely solidifies the control. Privately, completely behind closed doors, you remind them of what you just did. The implied message is exactly this: I handled it for you. I know your reality, but your secret is safe with me. I know you aren't actually who you pretend to be, but don't worry, I've got you. By doing this, the text claims you are creating a terrifying yet completely unbreakable sense of loyalty. They are never going to speak out against you simply because you are the only one holding the shield that protects them from their deepest fears.
And the source actually abruptly ends its lesson right after revealing this dark reality. It just leaves its audience hanging on the edge of figuring out just how deep psychological manipulation can really go. I mean, it's a framework built entirely on viewing human empathy and human insecurity as nothing more than levers in a machine, which honestly leaves us to reflect on our own lives and our own interactions based on what we've just unpacked. Take a close look at the people in your life who always seem to be fixing your problems and protecting your flaws. It really makes you wonder, if someone is perfectly shielding your insecurities, are they truly your protector? Or have they become your master?